Thanks, Rob. I'm asking my panelists, thanks a lot, Sheri, asking my panelists to join us so we can save time. Over the last few years, I've hosted a module at this event that's brought in the voice of youth. We've had some amazing high school students come to this forum and give their views of the world and challenge the paradigms that we hold as we face the future. As powerful and as jarring as some of their comments have been, we decided this year not to isolate those messages to a let's hear what the young people have to say format, but to spotlight the positive impact that occurs when we integrate the perspective of young with the old. The age-old belief that these young people just aren't willing to work as hard as us. Have you all ever heard that? Remember, they said that about us when we were young. We're not the first generation that has said that. At the same time, young people always believe that the old people just don't get it. How often have you heard that, and how often did you say that when you were younger? With the disruptions and unrest and changes that are going on in the world, we don't believe these perspectives and paradigms are sustainable. As my good friend Stephanie Pace Marshall says, perhaps there is a potential to think about a new narrative to disrupt and perturb these paradigms and create a new way to uncover the comment, I never thought about that. With that, we have today a wonderful group of panelists that span many, many different parts of our world. And they're going to talk about the value of working with each generation to recognize other generations. We've spent a lot of time so far talking about technology, AI, data. I'm going to ask you to park all that. We're actually going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about human beings and the importance of humans connecting at a human level. We've got three wonderful people. Sheri Steinig is Special Projects Director for Generations United, an organization that is focused on improving the lives of children, youth, and adults through intergenerational collaboration, policies, and programs. She's based in Denver and is responsible for leading the efforts to promote that organization in the community. Francie Richards is Head of External Affairs and Executive Director of Children's First Fund at Chicago Public Schools here in Chicago. Prior to this role, she was an executive with We Charity, an international organization that empowers 4 million youth to change the world through service. She's a millennial herself, so we actually have a millennial on the panel, and she has experienced and built efforts on connecting generations through education. Our third panelist, Al Landry, is no stranger to anyone who has attended Twin, and I'm glad I'm making him sing for his supper for a change this time. After serving our country for more than 26 years, retiring as colonel in the U.S. Army, he's held leadership positions in strategy and business development at Raytheon Missile Systems until his retirement a few years ago. Alan is based in Atlanta, and he is author of Growing Mentor Intelligence, a Field Guide to Mentoring, and he focuses on connecting generations in the business world. So with that, I'm going to pose a question to each of our panelists in terms of what makes what you do important and what do you get out of it? So who wants to start? Sheri, you want to start?
Oh, I can start. So I think back to an experience I had in second grade. I was a Girl Scout, or technically I was a Brownie, if you know the Girl Scout infrastructure. And we visited a nursing home. We dressed up. We were paraded in front of the adults that were there. We sang a couple of Christmas carols, and then we left. There was zero interaction between us and the older adults. I forgot that experience until I started working for Generations United, and we had an activity where we were trying to recall our first intergenerational experience. So jump forward a couple of years, I was able to visit a community in Coffeyville, Kansas called Windsor Place. It's a skilled nursing facility that has a kindergarten, a public school kindergarten classroom right in the middle of the facility. Every morning, the adults are lined up, the children come in, they greet people by name, they shake hands, they hug, pat shoulders, high fives, fist bumps. It's an entirely different experience. They go into their classroom. They come back 10 minutes later, they sing songs. One man that when I was visiting, his favorite song was You Are My Sunshine. The children would gather around him while they sing. He became so animated, he'd sing along to his best ability. The kids then moved back into their classroom. The adults went on with their day. Half an hour later, it was reading buddies. The kids grabbed their favorite book. They came and sat on a chair or a couch right next to an older adult and practiced their reading. They then leave, they go back. They're doing another activity. The older adults come into the classroom. They're all cutting shapes out for a stone soup activity. The adults are getting practice with their fine motor skills. The kids are getting practice with their fine motor skills. These are not experiences that those children or those adults forget. That happens every day at Windsor Place. And it happens continuously. Those kids will leave. They go on to first grade in the public elementary school. They have more compassion, they have more empathy. The adults have such life that's brought into their community with the presence of the kids. It's transformative for all ages.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Francie.
I don't think I realized how personal this issue was to me until I was invited to speak. My life's work is education and empowering a generation of young people to change the world, and particularly marginalized young people. I myself am a Mexican American, grew up in a very small town where there were no other Mexican Americans but my mother and our cousins. And I'm the only one that graduated college, left this town, the only one that didn't have an unplanned pregnancy dictate my future. I have been fortunate to work for Mayor Rahm Emanuel and a member of Congress and achieve a humbling amount of professional success that in this country statistically makes no sense for someone like me and with my background. And I credit all of that to not myself or hard work, but that there was always someone older than me pulling me along. There was always someone who made a intention to stop me after class or to welcome me to an event or to encourage me to go a certain way. And I think that if not for older generations and for mentorship, I wouldn't have the opportunity to work in education today.
Wonderful. Alan.
So the first thing I want to do is say thanks to Anna and to Stephanie and to Rob for giving me the opportunity to share a small part of my story and my work. Over the last 10 years of events, Ken before this and now Twin, the common thread that has tied it all together has been story, sharing story, telling story. And I can't think of anything more fundamental to tying the generations together than telling story and sharing story. And in my life work, that's around a topic of mentoring, where I wanted to change the narrative from what I had experienced, both good and bad, in my military experience, as well as working for a nonprofit as chairman of the board, as well as my time at a large aerospace defense firm. Each of you have the power to change lives, and we change the world, like we heard last night, one person at a time, not in these massive muscle movements. One person, one story, one narrative at a time. So let me just ask a question. How many of you in here are currently involved in a meaningful mentor relationship? Raise your hand. Now look around the room. Look around the room. Keep your hand up if that mentor relationship involves multiple generations, yourself and someone from another generation. Some of the hands went down and we still have some up. Those that are up, you already get this. Those whose hands did not go up, I'm going to throw the challenge out there to you. You have the power to change the world, one person, one relationship at a time. And so about 10 years ago when I heard Rob speak, and he said, let's move from lives of importance, self-importance, to lives of significance. When I retired from Raytheon, this became my life work, changing the world one person at a time through personal mentoring, and then writing my books on mentor intelligence, and taking it out on the road to change organizations, to help them maximize their human capital, because I believe that is the most undervalued resource in many organizations.
That's great. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about where we draw the real value of this. Sheri, you and I have spent some time talking about what is it that creates the magic? What is it that causes these moments to be so memorable? What do you see in our community, in our society today, that's crying out for intergenerational connectivity?
You know, one of the areas that we just are so almost laser focused on is the perpetual age segregation that we have created systemically, often for good. You know, we've been able to provide much better services for older adults by having them in facilities that are catering to that. But at the, you know, and in education, we have our kids in an environment where they're with people their same ages through the day, and that moving on, you know, their intergenerational experiences largely with their teachers or other staff at the school. So what sort of opportunities could we present if we were looking at our facilities, our structures, our systems that were able to bring the generations together? Instead of building a new school, there's a community in Massachusetts that built a new high school with a new senior center in there. They used the same gym, they used the library, they used the same resources. It was a way to combine resources instead of building, you know, one school or not supporting the senior center. So those opportunities, I think we need to look at spaces, we need to look at programs, we need to look at businesses as a way that how are they impacting multiple generations? Whether you're serving youth, you're serving older adults, you're serving generations in between, you're serving all generations, are you really facilitating opportunities for connecting? It's a natural state for us. I mean, many people in the room may have grown up in households where your grandparents and aunt and uncle live near you, It's just not so natural anymore, and our systems don't really support the way that generations want to be connected. We just work so hard we actually work hard to separate them instead of, as our speaker is saying, what's the easy way to do this? The easy way to do this is have people in the same facilities, and then you can have those types of natural interactions as well as knowing that there needs to be planned coordination, that it can't always just happen. You kind of throw them in the same room. It can often be like a middle school dance where the older adults are on one side of the room, the younger people on the other side of the room. So there needs to be that sort of building connections between the generations to get them together. And there's wonderful programs around the country, around the world that are doing this, but they're just small. You know, it's not sort of a systemic and institutional type of change that we'd like to see to build those opportunities.
Great. Alan.
So I think there's another piece to the secret sauce to make that happen. In addition to creating the forums and formats, you have to look deep into your heart and your soul about what you think and what your biases and prejudices are. I spent 5 years at that aerospace defense firm as a diversity and inclusion game changer. Not bad for an old bald white guy and a colonel. And I learned that, like most of us, we're all running from something instead of toward the differences. And I learned that each of us is a unique creation in mind, body, and spirit, and that there is an elegance to connecting generations, connecting the differences, that if you view your life as a beautiful piece of thread, alone that piece of thread is very weak and can be torn apart. But when you weave that thread together in a tapestry, we're stronger, and by the way, it's more beautiful. And by opening myself up and becoming vulnerable to the things that I was running away from instead of running toward them, I began to embrace the differences, and my life changed. I began to find my noble purpose in life, which is to help other people find their noble purpose. And I do that through mentoring.
Thank you for that. That's wonderful. I know this journey's been very personal for you, Alan. Francie, one of the things that occurs to me in the work that you do, you have been spending a lot of time working with children, getting them to help understand the importance of service. And when children perform service, by definition, they're working with older people. So what are some of the takeaways that you have from that experience in we.org that you potentially now bring to Chicago Public School District when you talk about things?
I had a really remarkable experience working in service learning with young people, and it reminded me that I, though fairly young, am still old in some
Everything's
ways.
relative.
It's all relative.
Relative.
The young people that I got to work with, who are preteens or teenagers today were much less empathetic to older generations because it really sits with them, the social issues and the environmental issues that they feel a great burden to carry, which I found to be a fairly mature perspective for preteen and teenagers, that they feel a weight. And granted, the bias here, these are young people who opt into wanting to be socially oriented and be service-minded. But that's what I took away from that experience, and not just the role that I and older generations have in helping them understand how these things came to be. This was not a coordinated effort to leave them in this condition. History can repeat itself. There are things that we should share as they do assume world leadership and try to solve these problems. But also we have a responsibility to help share what steps we might have taken differently if we'd had the opportunity to do it again.
Yes.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the notion of lack of empathy that a lot of young people might have today because of the state of the world, and there's probably resentment for, you guys screwed this all up, now we have to fix it, kind of a feeling. To what extent do you think technology actually exacerbates a level of empathy? I believe empathy happens when you have eyeball-to-eyeball conversations with people. I worry sometimes that technology, in all of its wisdom, is creating more of a divide than bringing people together. I'd love to get your 3 comments on how you feel about whether technology is something that will help or not help pulling generations together.
Interestingly, the Gen Z population tends to say that face-to-face communication is preferred for them, although they prefer YouTube over going to the movie theater. So it's maybe making a comeback. I will say, as we've already discussed in this conference, there are pros and cons, and their knowledge and awareness of the similarities in violence in the Middle East and what that and how they can see parallels in violence in the city of Chicago is tremendous and an incredible opportunity, but there will be consequences and ways that we should support that type of exploration of the world.
Great. Sure.
Yeah, I would just add, we think a lot about kind of high tech and high touch, that it's not one or the other, but that it's really both. And how are there ways that, one, you can use technology to build bridges or build connections. There's one program that is attached to a senior living community that did video chatting with students in Colombia that were learning English. So a way that they, and there's a great video around that about the project that they did, but it was a unique opportunity for people to learn about different cultures through a skill set that one generation had that another generation needed someone to practice that. There's other examples where you have your phone, you don't know how to use it, you go into, there's a time set up at the library where you can go and have your younger consultant come in and tell you how to do that. Why I want the black background, not the white background. I want these screens. There's opportunities for digital natives to help us non-natives. To learn those types of opportunities. There's skills there. I think it's a reality, and there's ways of just building community around it.
That's great.
I totally agree with that. It resonates with me. Social media has allowed me as an individual person to mentor people I've never met. A young gentleman that lives in Nigeria who found me on LinkedIn and asked me if I would mentor him and send him a copy of my book. A gentleman from Moscow who somehow found my articles on LinkedIn, and he connected with me. And I didn't realize it, but he wrote a review of my book. And I found him on LinkedIn. I sent him a thank you note. I said, "Are you the guy?" He said, "Yeah." So it's not a either or. It's a yes. And while absolutely agree, there is no substitute to telling story face to face. When you're in a situation where you can't be face to face, you don't have to walk away and say, I can't mentor because I don't have that. Technology is fantastic, and if you don't know how to use it, go find somebody from Gen Z because they'll be happy to show you. And they usually won't laugh at you too long. So.
Well, I was struck this morning by the conversation around humanizing technology, and I really liked that. I liked the notion of technology not only giving us data faster, better. I mean, Toby Redshaw kind of scared me with the presentation today about how fast we're going to get information. I'm not sure I want all that information. But if technology can actually help us become better humans, I love that. I love that idea. I love the idea that in the wake of technology, we don't lose the humanity that makes our species so special. I think that the work that all of you are doing to connect generations is phenomenal. I have personal experience with watching this magic happen when I had, for 10 years, 3 generations living in my household, and I saw the magic that occurred when that happened. And I do think that both old and young benefit by sharing their lives, sharing their experiences, teaching one another, because I do believe it's a mutual. Any type of mentoring is a mutual mentoring process. And I think there's real value in doing that. I'm going to ask you each to kind of give one final comment that you would like to leave with the audience on what it is that you would like them to have a takeaway. It can be a comment, it can be a story. We've got time for both.
My generational story, I think the thing that makes me most proud in my life, my grandmother was actually trafficked into this country to work the farms. And it's only been 56 years from that time to a time where her granddaughter has an advanced degree and is living the life of her choosing. And when she came to visit me recently, she said, you've validated my life. You've made my life worth living. And it's not a great distance between us, and of course she's family, and so that's special. But I think even professionally, the times where I feel really challenged and wonder, are we going to be talking about the achievement gap forever? Am I going to be spending the rest of my life on this? And the people who I get to work beneath and get to learn from say, I may, you don't have to. It can be you. And so I think to the extent that we can add intention in our relationships around that is, for me, very fulfilling and inspires me every day.
Great, thanks.
I would just, I would like for folks to just be thinking about ways that the work that you're doing, and no matter what sector you're working in, cross-sector, whatever, is impacting younger and older people. That we don't live in a silo where we're only, that people are part of community, that people are part of families, that there are intergenerational impacts to everything that we do, and to, as much as possible, include those voices in the work that you do. Don't plan anything for older and younger people without asking the older and younger people that you're working with what they want to do, that their voices are critical to what ends up being successful intergenerational initiatives.
Thank you. Alan?
We change the world one life at a time, one relationship at a time. Last night in the conversations on purpose and mission, I was sharing this perspective that there are 2 points on our lifeline that we don't control, the beginning and the end. And everything else in the middle of that is an opportunity for us to touch one another and to change the world, to make a difference. In 1972, I was involved in a very terrible automobile accident and fell asleep behind the wheel of an automobile going about 70 miles an hour before the days of seat belts and things like that. And the friend with me died instantly, and I almost died several times. And when I woke up in ICU after 4.5 hours of surgery and a cardiac arrest from the anesthetic, I knew that my buddy was dead, and he was dead because of a weakness on my part. And my message to you is, beginning and end, you don't know where they are. In the middle, make every breath count. Make every breath count. So for those of you that didn't raise your hand about mentoring, I throw the challenge out there. Find somebody today from a different generation. What makes kin and twin special is it's family, and it's about relationship and about storytelling across the generations. So thank you again, Anna. I appreciate that.
You know, my takeaways, I always try and write down some of the takeaways. Perpetual age segregation that exists in our society is happening more and more. It's structural. We think we're doing people a favor, and we're actually creating isolation. We all need to be careful about creating more isolation. Reaching out across generations increases empathy, mutual empathy. I love that idea, that in a very challenging and serious world that we live in, increasing empathy can only make things better. And finally, reach out to youth and to other generations to find your noble purpose. I want to say thank you very much to my three panelists. Please give them a warm welcome.